Several years ago, I became aware that an edition of Dungeon magazine had run an article in which they had listed their top 30 Dungeons & Dragons modules, and so being a fan of modules, I naturally sought it out. And this was it, issue number 116, published back in November 2004. What a waste of time the article was. It was little more than a predictable exercise in industry backslapping. The list was dominated by the lazy supermodules of the mid-1980s in all their disjointed glory, rehashed with recycled artwork that bore little resemblance to the adventures. They were poorly edited and packed with badly written filler. Certainly the source material for these supermodules was often classic and thoroughly inspirational, but the reissues themselves, well, they were just cash grabs. The poll also focused heavily on more famous modules, ignoring some of the lesser known gems, and there was clearly an effort to squeeze in something from each era of D&D, whether or not these were really any good. The article was crap, and from time to time I'd Google it and reread it, just to remind myself of how crap it was. So for some reason, unknown even to me, a few years later, well, in 2019, I decided to take it upon myself to do a better job, or at least attempt to. I considered how and where I would achieve this for all of about 5 minutes, and then simply plunged in. Firstly, I will detail the methods I used. I set it up so that it would be 3 distinct rounds of voting. Round 1 would be the initial selection round. 95 modules were listed in chronological order. I made a few mistakes with this list. I forgot about a few of the Forgotten Realms modules from the late 1980s and included some of the numbered Dragonlance supplements that were more sourcebook than module. I don't think this made any difference whatsoever to the outcome though. My list would only include AD&D modules from the first edition era, otherwise the list would have been far too long. Sadly, this means that basic and expert adventures such as the Isle of Dread and the Lost City would not be included. And neither would the better Judges Guild efforts, namely Tegel Manor and the Dark Tower. I made sure to include modules individually rather than having the whole series as one. This was not possible for T1 to 4, the Temple of Elemental Evil though, as T2, 3 and 4 were never released as individual adventures. This unfortunately created the oddity of having T1, the Village of Homlet, effectively in twice. I'll talk more of that later. I-12, Egg of the Phoenix, was also included, as the R series of modules it was compiled from was never directly released by TSR. It was an RPGA series. The modules were then divided into eras based on their year of publication. One module from each era was then randomly placed into each qualifying group. This created 14 groups containing 6 or 7 modules. Members of the first edition Advanced Dungeons & Dragons group on Facebook were then asked to assign votes to each module. In round 1 this was 6 votes per person with a maximum of 3 to each module. They could vote 3 points for 2 modules, or 3, 2, 1, or 1 to each of 6 modules. However they wanted to divide them, it was up to them. I posted each qualifying list of modules in turn, and the voting for each group lasted 24 to 36 hours. I chose this particular Facebook group as it is the largest such group on the platform, and many of the original AD&D luminaries are members. The top 3 modules in each qualifying group then advanced on to round 2. A quick note here is that some of the 4th place finishers received a higher percentage vote than the 3rd place modules in other groups. For example, the aforementioned I-12 picked up a higher percentage than N4 Treasure Hunt, but it was position in the group that mattered for qualification. Thus I-12 got eliminated on this stage and N4 just about scraped through. Round 2 was where the real business of working out what was popular began. The 42 qualifying modules were seeded according to their percentage of available votes that they received in round 1. Modules were then put into 7 qualifying groups of 6 based on that seeding. Members of the Facebook group then had to assign a ranking to their own personal top 5 in each group of 6. The top 2 in each group then advanced to round 3, along with the 2 best performing third place finishers. Round 3 onwards. 16 modules qualified from round 2. This was a straight knockout round by means of a poll, with the modules going head to head. Matchups were determined based on performance in round 2. First place versus 16th place, second place versus 15th place, and so on. The winner of each matchup would then go through to the quarterfinals. The winner of those would go through to the semi-finals, and the winners of the semi-finals would play off in the final. Interestingly, 2 modules were tied in one of the matchups, so rather than run it all again, I put them both through into a 3-way quarterfinal. 2 modules that were tied in that both finished in the top 5 overall, so I think I was justified in doing that. Now, I'm not making any claims regarding how scientific this system was, but it was fun and produced some interesting results. Plus, it was about gaining the opinions of those who'd actually played the adventures rather than the industry bigwigs. Now, one weakness was highlighted in that many cases votes were cast based on familiarity rather than quality. Of course, this would mean that more common modules might be favoured along the way, and some were. There were a lot of modules in the poll, and naturally very few people would be familiar with all of them. I got a few grumbles from people wondering why the hell I was doing it all, but most of the feedback was overwhelmingly positive, and hundreds of members of that Facebook group joined in, including some of those who had written the modules that were included. I got messages of support from several famous TSR names and respected bloggers, and that was nice. So, to the results, and how did they compare to that Dragon magazine poll? If you want the full rundown of the top 20, then it will be in a follow-up video, as this one is already a little too long. But I will describe a few general findings here. Notable was the fact that not a single Dragonlance module made it past the initial qualifying stage. Dragon magazine had included DL1 in their top 30. The AD&D community clearly did not agree. Some of the better modules from the post-1983 era also suffered too, mostly due to a lack of familiarity. UK's 6 and 7 and I7 were generally well regarded by gamers who know of them, but clearly very few do. There was that noticeable bias as well towards the better known modules, but that was to be expected, as familiarity will of course affect someone's opinion of something, and many of the popular adventures were popular for good reason. As I've already said, the results will be covered in the next video, so if you want to find out what they were, please click the link in the blurb. Thanks for watching this though, please do hit like, subscribe, comment, etc, etc. Till next time, good night.